friends. Welcome to another episode of the Power of Nine podcast. I am your host, Aaron Eggert. Today's guest has created a firm focused on sparking conversations and tracking results before, during, and after virtual and in-person events. We're going to spend time on all that and more with my friend, Jen Gilhoi. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Aaron.
Yeah, did you like that opening there where I
brought your
you
nailed it.
Yeah, brought your whole company value proposition into one opening.
Perfect. I love it. Couldn't have said it better.
Good. So first thing I want to ask you is, before we dig into your journey, you even addressed this on your website as I was doing some prep. Jen or Jennifer, and talk to me about the transition from Jen to Jennifer to Jen again.
Yeah, it's a long story, but yes. In fact, I just changed my LinkedIn profile last Thursday to Jen Gilhoi, not Jennifer.
All right.
So,
all right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I started off as actually Jenny, and then all my high school friends know me in that context. And when I got to college, I switched it to Jen, thinking, it just sounded more fun. And then actually graduating college, I was like, I need something more professional. What goes on that resume? And it was Jennifer. So I've been back and forth between those for a while. And then I came to my co-working space, and immediately the owner was like, you're Jen, you're just Jen. And so it's interesting how other people have kind of defined that, and how your name kind of, if you have a name like mine, can change over the course of your life, and people know you from different spaces. But now it seems like Jen has some momentum. So I am going with that.
If I have any say in how this all goes, I like it just sounds better to me coming out of my mouth, Jen Gilhoi, rather than Jennifer. That's just the way that I've known you over the last couple of years. So I just I'm going to go with that. So I love it.
Awesome. Perfect.
So one thing I want to get out of the way here at the very beginning, just to make sure that we're establishing this out of mutual respect, is your pronouns. Could you share your pronouns with me, please?
Yes, they are she and her.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So Jen, it's shocking to me. I love this about I recorded a podcast the other day, and so many people grew up in rural communities. You are yet another rural gal. So you grew up in Southwest Minnesota, right?
Right. Yep. In Jackson.
Yeah. So what is Jackson known for?
We're a farming community, and we're just off of I-90, a little bit north of the Minnesota-Iowa border. I've often been labeled as being from Iowa, which, just to be clear, no, we're in Minnesota, and it's a town of about 4,000. So smaller community. My parents were bankers, but most of my friends and the community I grew up in was all about farming. And that was a lot of my first jobs, working in the cornfields and the bean fields, doing all of that really hard, but somehow rewarding labor.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you, so your parents were both bankers, and so did they work at the same bank or different banks?
Different banks. My mom was at the savings and loan, and my dad was at the bank in town, 3 blocks apart, and did that for their entire career and working lives.
Yeah. Interesting. So what was your family dynamic? What were your siblings? What was the sibling dynamic?
Yeah. So I have a younger brother. He's 5 years younger than me. And, it actually seemed like a very large gap growing up. And we reconnected when he moved to the cities after graduating college from Sioux Falls. And I was like, wow, you're pretty cool. You're an entirely different person that I remember growing up. But yeah, we shared obviously the same experiences, and we had a very safe and supportive upbringing, a very kind of stable home environment.
So did you mention to me at one point that your brother's name is Paul, that he's an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah. So you have both of my parents as bankers, kind of staying in the same industry, very financially driven, very savvy with money. And then you somehow have both my brother and I. He's been an entrepreneur for probably 18, 19 years. And myself 9 years as my own kind of solopreneur. And it's pretty funny to like look at how we were brought up in a very safe, secure environment, and how we both said, nope, I think we're going to take some risks here, be entrepreneurial. And we both have that somehow.
Yeah. So I always like to ask the question of nature versus nurture. So your entrepreneurial spirit, was that something that you were born with, or is that something that was nurtured through your upbringing? It kind of sounds to me like a little bit of both, because it was almost like you went the opposite way of what your parents brought you up in that stable environment.
Yeah, I think, and it's ironic, Aaron, this weekend I was reading this book called Quiet, and it's about nature versus nurture, introverts versus extroverts, and it was eye-opening. So what I landed on when I was thinking about my story and what I would share is really that, there is inborn temperaments, and I tended to be highly sensitive and also introverted, but because of the way that we grew up in such a supportive household, that I actually just felt really safe. And I always felt I could try new things if I wanted to. And so I'm guessing my brother kind of felt some of the same things based on our upbringing. And then, to find us both in those entrepreneurial careers is just like, it's a combination of both. It always is. And as a parent, my kids are they're very different. And it kind of lets me off the hook a little bit to say, it's a combination.
Yeah. Are you an introvert?
I am. Yes.
Yeah.
I like to call myself a borderline, right? But I think we all have certain things we do to like recharge our energy. And I love to write. So I like to spend a lot of time in creative tasks by myself, but you've probably seen me now. We're back in person at events. And I absolutely love connecting with people at events. So I think those, the more that we talk about it and do away with the labels so much is really healthy, because I've kind of landed on, I have some of those quiet, more introverted kind of things I like to do, but I love being with people. So it's a good pairing of both.
I think the term is, isn't it ambivert? When you're introvert, extrovert, you're I find myself kind of in the middle, where I do lean more extrovert, but I don't like going in.
You do for sure. If I had to label you, yes.
I do lean on that side, but I don't like going and working a room, right? Like I like going and having conversations with small groups of people. I don't like going and bouncing around and things like that. And I do get recharged by maybe sitting by the fire on a Friday night rather than going out with, 4 different couples, or chopping wood by myself on a Sunday rather than going to a Vikings game or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just is like a balance. In this book, Quiet really outlines how you can create your own environment. So it's nature and nurture, and then understanding that and creating your own environment and your free will. So I think that also ties into the entrepreneurial drive that I have, because in an agency, I was at an ad agency for a very short amount of time. That was absolutely overwhelming to me, the interruptions daily. And so the idea that, entrepreneurship, I could like create my environment and where I wanted to work was really important.
Yeah. And I think, so Quiet is, I think the author is Carol Dweck, isn't it?
Susan Cain.
Oh, Susan Cain.
Yep.
I'm thinking of a different book. All right. So Susan Cain. Anybody?
There's probably a lot of books.
Yeah. So I think Carol Dweck wrote a book about being an introvert as well. So what I will say, so that book Quiet by Susan Cain, that is, and our listeners that are introverts or work with or live with introverts, that is a fantastic book to consume. It's a good short read, and a lot of really good insights. I read it about 6 months ago. I thought it was fantastic as well, Jen.
Yeah, it's absolutely freeing to realize that even if, like the chapter on public speaking, I've always told myself as an introvert, I don't do that. But oh my gosh, what you realize is if you're passionate about a subject and who you're talking with, that falls away. And that was just really reassuring to kind of hear that research backs, supports the fact that we can all have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. So you grew up in Southwest Minnesota, but yet you decided to matriculate somewhere else for college. Where did you end up going to school after high school?
I went to St. Thomas in the Twin Cities. Yep.
Yeah. What was that experience like growing up in a rural community to then come on into the big city?
Oh, I could not wait. And one of the drivers for St. Thomas was they had an amazing study abroad program. So I already knew that I would be going to Rome and I would be doing that my senior year. So I went into college knowing that that's kind of, art and language communications, all of that, along with a great, marketing business degree was there for me. And then that last semester spent 4 months in Rome, which was incredible.
Wow. What couple things to unpack that a little bit. Why marketing? So what part of marketing attracted you to that
Yeah, I think specifically it was advertising. So growing up, I was always looking at fashion magazines and doing a lot of reading of publications. My room was covered with words and copy and fashion, and really the advertising and journalism class I had at St. Thomas was a turning point for me because not only the message and marketing, but the writing component. And I hadn't really considered journalism or writing. So I do have a minor in journalism from St. Thomas, which has come more into play as I've grown my Sparktrack business.
Yeah. And then why Italy? So you made that decision like pre undergrad that you decided you wanted to go to Italy, and this was, you were bound and determined to go to Rome.
Yeah, I was. And I think it had a lot to do with St. Thomas at the time, had an amazing program. They partnered with Loyola out of Chicago, and they had this area in just north of the Vatican in Rome. And so I also grew up Catholic, and for many reasons, it just felt like the opportunity to go with a group of people. The school had a program that was really well established. And just the fact that I loved the sound of the language. I had actually taken Spanish, but I immediately was like, I don't know. I fell in love with the language and of course the food and the pasta.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And olive oil probably too, right?
Yes, for sure. EVOO.
Yeah. So then the other nice thing that I really like about St. Thomas, and really in any of St. Thomas isn't a MIAC school anymore, but the MIAC schools, is that they have such good connections to organizations for internships. And you had mentioned to me that you were so fortunate to have so many great internships. Let's talk over what some of those internships were and then how they helped shape and inform the things that you wanted to do after you graduated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a couple internships that were more in the business community, and then I had one more community service work, which St. Thomas also supports doing. So I did that work in the Frogtown area. So it was an exposure to how different people in the community lived that I just never had experienced or known of coming from my rural environment. And really the two business internships, a couple things they did other than just get me into those spaces was I had to take a bus from St. Paul into downtown Minneapolis, gain confidence and like just navigating those spaces, like witnessing how a corporation worked. And a couple of those internships, I mean, they're really not that long. They're like 3 months over the course of a summer, but really targeted. One was more in the advertising space, and the other one that I loved was actually at an art gallery. So I was helping with event marketing and promotions, and it was on like 7th Street downtown. And at the time, it was just kind of right before I was going to Italy. So it just aligned in so many ways. And that was an easy, like, my guidance counselor at St. Thomas, just lining that up for me. I mean, I had to apply for it, but they really made it streamlined. And that's the incredible benefit of going to a school like that.
Right. Absolutely. So after you did your time at St. Thomas, you had all these amazing internships. You were able to go to Italy and study abroad. What was your first gig out of college?
So I had worked at a marketing company all throughout probably my junior and senior year, downtown Minneapolis, called TM Marketing, and they were a promotional merchandising company. So it was a really nice transition to graduate and have worked there in a very small capacity, something like 10 hours per week, but then translate into take that experience and have like a year where I could kind of get a feel for what the working world demanded, and
Mm-hmm.
just find that right balance. And then also really start looking for something like my first, what I would call, felt like a real job beyond the marketing company. Cause I kind of felt like I had outgrown that after a while. It was a smaller company. So I was actually looking for something big. And I did land my next job at Allianz Life for 3 years. And that was large. And I love the impact and the difference from being in a smaller, 2 to 3 person firm to moving to Allianz, obviously global.
Yeah. What type of marketing did you focus on with Allianz? I'm sure you worked on a pretty decent sized team.
Yeah. I think the draw of Allianz was just like, wow, corporate benefits, like, you're coming out of school and they have all these wonderful things that they do as part of their corporate culture. And they, travel was a huge piece of that. But the day job, the piece that I was doing, which I find interesting, was very financially driven. So it was marketing for variable annuities. And, there's compliance around that, very careful things, only certain things you could say. So it was a good exercise in really understanding, what we could actually say to the client and the challenge of like marketing those services. And we did a lot of events at Allianz too, which was kind of another first taste of like what that looked like to get in front. We had our portfolio managers for the funds that we would organize events for. I was like, I kind of like these events.
Did you, all right, let's hone in on this area here of that TM marketing to Allianz transition. What were some of the pros of going to a corporate side of things? And then what were some of the things that you wish that you had back when you went there that you missed in small business?
Yeah. So small business, first of all, my aunt was an employee at the company. And so that, close relationship that, you could, fail and get things very wrong and be easily forgiven. It was very much a family feeling in an environment. You felt supported. Everyone there kind of knew who I was. And then going to corporate was like, I have to prove myself. And there's so many opportunities. And how do I, and so many opportunities to move once you got in the door at Allianz. So I think it was just like, widening the perspective and the, going from the small, I think I adjusted very, very well. I was happy to be there. I loved that kind of corporate space. We were a smaller team within a larger global company. So that also felt good.
How long did you spend at Allianz?
I was there for 3 years. And then the advertising, the drive to do more creative marketing, move from variable annuities to something more sexy and fun, like websites at the time, drew me to a company downtown St. Paul called Digital Cafe, which eventually became Zentropy Partners, which was the website marketing arm of Campbell Methuen.
And so
right around the crash of the web.com crash.
Yeah. So
I was there about 1.5 years.
Did the .com bust there? Did that have an effect on your role in your employment?
Yes. So I was one of, half the company was laid off within 2 days, and that was devastating. Wow. So I would have been maybe 25 at the time. Of course, I thought it was the end of the world.
Right. Right.
I would too. It's like, I would too. How could this happen? Yeah. Even despite that 50% of the company was being let go, you feel lost because you also have been told that there's a career path and a career like progression where you go. And at that time, I didn't have any inkling of what an entrepreneurial path would look like. I was just like, I got to find my next full-time job, and it's going to be at a corporation,
Yeah.
At that time, I think Zentropy was maybe 60 people.
Still a good size.
So,
though.
I went from small to global to, it was a really good size.
Yeah.
But talk about just that experience of like just feeling absolutely lost. And what's next at that point? I was asking myself.
Yeah. What did you do with yourself then? So you're, mid-20s, you're going through what is just a weird time of, a little bit of a recession, right? And then, you have to figure out what your next step is. What was going through your head?
Um, so I took some time and started to just, at that point too, I had, started dating my now husband, and other things were starting to happen. Do we want to get married? Do we want to, move? Like all of those things were coming into play. And I was questioning whether or not I wanted to be part of like the advertising agency or world if people could be so disposable. So I was really carefully considering my next move. And what I ended up doing was interviewing at Campbell Mithun and also with the American Institute of Architects at the time. And AIA Minnesota is a professional services organization, and it felt safe. It felt good. And I was surprised to kind of realize that I had come back to almost full circle in a way of the dream of being an architect. So I had a childhood dream of being an architect, which never really came to fruition, obviously, for many reasons. But interesting that I would come back in a capacity and market for architects in the profession and the built environment. So I stayed there for 10 years. So
wow, what type of work did you do for AI? So I know AIA just from my past life, and so that's a big organization, serves a lot of different people that do a lot of different things related to not only architecture but general contracting and interior design, and so what type of work did you do there?
Yeah, so I was the communications director. So anything communications related, website, press releases. The other big thing that I really got a flavor and taste for was events, because what we were doing was bringing architects together for continuing education or awards, bringing a community together. And that was really cool. I wasn't always the event planner, but I was the communication person to spread the word about all the events that were happening through the organization. So I feel like that's a little flavor and a little cue of where I went next with my path.
Yeah, you did. So I know the next firm you're going to talk about. So I know RSP really well, just from my days at iSpace. So you then transitioned over to RSP.
Yeah. Yeah. So I left AIA, went right to RSP for, I think I was there a little over a year. And that was it was interesting because when I had left AIA, my thoughts were really focused around, wow, I've marketed and talked about what architects do in the built environment for 10 years, but I don't actually know what happens within a firm. And I just wanted like that full experience. I wanted to understand what happens at day one when a project comes in the door. How do architects and the clients like work together? And so that's why I went to RSP, and it was a larger, marketing team. At AIA, I was essentially the marketing person on my own. And so I also wanted that collaboration. I think I was craving that. And so at RSP, we did get that. We had a team of, 6 to 8 marketers, depending on, the time frame that I was there. And that was a really, again, back to a little bit more larger environment. I think there was maybe 350, 400 employees at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just know they serve so many different types of clients, and I know that they work with Target and I mean, they're just, they've got a whole team dedicated to certain corporate clients. So I just know that they are a massive machine. We talk about this on this podcast occasionally, but there's a time in people's lives. Jamie Tate's talked about it, and it's she calls it decade shift, and it's about people going through different periods in their life and their mindsets and things like that. And so while you were at RSP, so is that about the time you turned? I think you said you turned 40, and you were dealing with you were under probably a lot of stress. And I know just from being in that environment, that is a little bit of a boiler room, right? Because, bids are due and clients are demanding, and not only that, but then, that trickles down to you in marketing. So I can see that just being a little bit of a pressure cooker. What was happening with you all at that time?
So around the time I was turning 40, I was at RSP Architects and noticing I had a young family. So my kids were 4 and 2. and juggling all the stresses of that environment also just led to an eye-opening experience where I really felt like I needed to stop drinking.
Mhm.
And so that shift happened around age 40. And the best thing that has ever happened to me, but also very scary. I didn't know what it looked like to start my path to recovery while being in a corporate environment, nor was I ready to share with everyone, around me what was going on. I wanted to kind of go away and find a way to heal that I could do so privately. And of course,
Mhm.
that's not always an option. So at the time, things were that was happening for me personally and wanting to do that. And we just at RSP just decided to part ways. And I left there with the time and space to really dedicate to start to get healthy. And that took years on that journey to really get to be to the place where I'm now, which is completely alcohol free. But that was the space that I needed. I needed to remove myself from that environment so I could remove everything and start to rebuild things for myself again, find myself.
Yeah, right. You gotta have a foundation, right? It's just like building a house. You got to start with the foundation, and you just had to strip it all down to the studs and start rebuilding, right?
Yeah, and there was just no way I could do that with all the other things going. So that's what I did.
Yeah. So, the one thing you're very active on social media, and obviously with your business, right? But then also too personally, and one of the things you are relatively outspoken about is dependency, and your journey, and you've been on podcasts and stuff, and I'm not going to get into all of that now. I just want to make sure that people know that there's resources out there. Jen has put herself out there as a resource for people that are maybe working through some things that if they need to have to be pointed in the right direction related to dependency, whether it be alcohol or substance abuse, any type of dependency. But I think you going through that, I always like to talk about the paradigm shift that people have. This was a very large paradigm shift. And not only was it this part of your entrepreneurial journey, but it was just part of your overall life journey, because it just had such a huge, profound effect on your life, and then the trajectory in which you move forward. So as you were going through all that, was there thoughts bubbling up in the back of your mind where it was like, I don't know if I can work for anybody anymore, or I think I just need to do my own thing, and I just don't think I'm made to be a good employee anymore?
Amen. Yes, that was it. You got that right. No, I think what happened was when I stepped away from RSP, I had a 6-month, 50% of my time kind of contract role that really helped me test the waters inadvertently of entrepreneurship, because I was like, what am I going to do? And if I'm going to look for a full-time job, I do need something in the meantime. And what happened was that I fell in love with the lifestyle and even being able to create my own schedule, and my creativity started to flourish. I started to come back. And I think once I had a taste of that, I knew I couldn't go back to a cubicle or even, the open office environments. I was so much more productive, so much more at home, just being on my own as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So is that the inception of Sparktrack, or what was Sparktrack, or what talk about that time frame of when were, let's talk about where the bubbling was, let's think about it like a volcano. When was it the bubbling up, and then when did the explosion of Sparktrack happen?
Yeah, well, it was a slow flow to kind of get to the point of that, because I still had kind of people around me. My husband, was like, aren't you going to apply for some full-time jobs? And I'm like, and I was straddling the line between that, exploring what it looked like to be on my own, but yet looking at all these jobs being kind of fed to me or on LinkedIn to say, I could easily go and get back into that. So I did that for a year or so before I actually even committed to coming up with the name Sparktrack. And then a year later, actually having a really amazing client who shifted that paradigm from like, okay, no more looking at full-time jobs, all in on the entrepreneurial piece. A client trusted me, gave me X amount of dollars over what I proposed to deliver something to them. And at that point was the shift to be like, I'm all in. And the way that it made me feel was like, oh, I know this is something big and I can't just set that aside, push it down and go back into a corporate space in the way that I had been before.
Yeah. Was Sparktrack then what Sparktrack is now?
Interestingly enough, you said in the beginning, sparking conversations, tracking results, all came from just my personal love of just getting to know people and having conversations, but also noticing a missing component in marketing, which is follow-up on many levels. So Sparktrack definitely aligns with what I do today, and even more specifically in the event space, which is something that I more intentionally got into about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. So let's give you this time here to talk about exactly what Sparktrack does, because I think just by saying sparking conversations and tracking the results, I don't think I'm going to do the justice of
it's meant to just pique curiosity, Erin.
Right,
I mean, it sounds so much more exciting than saying I'm a marketing communications professional, but essentially,
it's very specific in what you do, because I think there's and I love the concept of your business. I will say I hired you for a project. Not only are you a member of Coalition 9, but you're also, we did work together. And I just think your process is fantastic. The way that you manage that on the front and back end, and then obviously during the event. So talk about what you're doing and the types of successes that you're having for clients.
Yeah, I would love to talk specifically about the event space because that has changed so much. And what I do for companies or event hosts is I don't do the event planning, but I come in with the idea of what does your entire event communication from beginning to end look like, and how can we build community and engagement around that experience. So that includes, interviewing and doing blog content prior to the event. It includes then measuring, who came to the event, how can you nurture those relationships of people that met at the event, after the event, and how can you, actually show a real return on event investment. And that comes directly from my experience of 10 years with AIA hosting events where we do a 4-day conference, people would leave, and there was never any discussion or follow-up on what was learned. So that is where I am able to have a really huge impact, because I find that clients aren't even thinking along those lines. They literally are like, what defines an event success for many is how many people we actually get to attend. Yeah. And, those type of things that they're looking at. And then what beyond that? So I also educate a lot on what's possible before, during, and after an event. And I think my clients really appreciate that, because that's where we come up with some new ideas. And then the expectations around the event aren't just how many butts and seats. It is, what's the longevity of those relationships you want to build. And depending on the business, those relationships can take a very long time to come to fruition.
Yeah, I think it's that stickiness, right? And I think now more than ever, you're now taking two things that have typically been independent of each other and have, let's just say, they flirted with each other, but now really like merging them together with social media and, whatever it might be related to hashtags or follows or whatever is going on, and depending on what platform you're using. And then the events, because I'll tell you, I guarantee of the people that listen to this podcast and they pay for events, 95% of them, I bet you, have no way of tracking any of that stuff. And that is one of the things that needs to create that stickiness as you move forward.
Yep. And I do things like coach and help clients on having what I call the event recap, which is my signature. So I'm writing that and putting that together, delivering that to the client the same day of the event, and then doing social media and other methods to engage with the audience within like 48, 72 hours in that window, because it's so fresh. And a lot of event hosts might come back to it and do a recap internally like 2 weeks later. And then it just feels like so much is missed. So you said it beautifully though, Erin, I might steal that, but it's like the merger of the event plus like all these other networking and community building things you do. So bringing that together in a continuum.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So, and you, like I said, we worked together on an event earlier, and your writing skills are insane because what you can crank out in a short period of time. I was like, I don't know, I was super impressed. So I think just simply your writing skills are one of those things where the things you're able to pull out of that brain of yours is super impressive. So there's my shameless plug for you.
Thank you.
The work we did together.
Yeah.
And now recently you've been doing great things with Sparktrack, but now you're part of a new venture that just recently has been released in September called Ad Women. Talk about that. I'm super excited for you to talk about this because I've already made an introduction related to this because I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I think the mission is outstanding, and you have collected so many interesting and amazing, talented women to be a part of this. I just can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Now, Ad Women has been about 18 months in the works, 16 to 18. So Renita Faye is the founder, and we connected right after George Floyd, and we're talking about how can we make an impact and do more in the creative space, and how do we show up and actually take action on the change that we want to see in our community. And what we landed on was the business community and what we know. And Ad Women was born of the idea that we really want to be able to help corporations, businesses that are struggling to understand what real and authentic diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like, and be the kind of umbrella agency that can come in and help them do that. So we are white women. Renita and I are white. We have another Asian woman on the board. We have a Black man on the board. The four of us founded this with the idea that we would build those relationships in the companies and connections that we knew, but also bring up our BIPOC community, which is Black and brown women that have the younger demographic that have typically not been a part of or sought after for some of these roles, and bring them in a way that doesn't put them into some of those corporate spaces, which actually still feel pretty toxic, and allows them to do work, collaboratively, say at the Coven or Modern Well, for example, and in spaces where they can really get that great experience and land a job, wherever they would like, if they choose to do that. But we also have a very entrepreneurial spirit with Ad Women in that Renita, myself, everyone on the board, all maintain our individual entrepreneurial brands, but come together under this umbrella to deliver creative services with the lens of advancing creativity and diversity.
Yeah. It's kind of like the event. It's kind of like the Avengers. Right?
Yes.
Like
yes.
A bunch of superheroes. Yeah. I love it. Well, I think, I know it's new, and I know you've just recently launched the new brand, and I've spent time on your website, but I do think what you're doing is fantastic. And gives me so much more pride that you're doing something like that. And you're even just a part of our Coalition 9 community. So I just love when I hear good people coming together doing amazing things like that.
Yeah, thank you. And Erin, you've brought many people into the Coalition 9 community that I've also appreciated, and we just need to do more of that.
Yep, that's what it's all about, right? Good people need to know good people.
Yeah, that's your tagline. Yeah.
I love it. So Jan, you have such a fantastic story, and I was just looking at my notes, and it started out with Jackson, Minnesota, and we're ending up with Ad Women, and what an amazing journey that you've had. And I know that you're just at the beginning of some of the more outstanding things that you're going to continue to do.
Well, right. And funny that you mentioned the decade shifting. So I'm like, does that happen like on the decade, every decade? Because I definitely am feeling that approaching, a larger milestone number coming up. So our April Seifert, our psychologist friend that you introduced me to, that now she and I have become buddies. And then Jamie Tates, like I referred to earlier, they both have said independently to me that it's about 7 to 10 years
in that decade shift. So, I had mine at 40, and God only knows what's going to happen in the next 7 to 10 years. I'm 44 now, so I'm sure in the next 3 to 6 years, something's going to happen. But that's part of the deal, right?
Yes. And just a note on Coalition 9, which is we all get to participate and witness each other's journeys through the experience of Coalition 9. So that's been amazing. And I thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm honored to have you as a member. With that little nugget, I'm going to be able to transition into 9 questions. I can see the anguish on your face, which tells me that you're excited. Jen, can you confirm to me that you have no idea what I'm about to ask you?
I don't.
Okay, good.
I wish I did.
All right. All right. Question 1. What is one guilty pleasure that you indulge in?
But I don't, I think I'll answer this in that I should feel guilty about, but I really don't. So every night I have, tea and chocolate, several chocolate squares. And that's just I don't even know how long I've been doing that. And I used to feel guilty about it. Now I just kind of own it.
Yeah, that is not even that bad. So
no, but the guilt, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, it depends on how many chocolate.
It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse. All right. What is your superpower?
I will say empathy. And the reason I have this answer ready is because I've actually done some work around that. And I used to feel like, really taking on, others' experiences was sometimes draining of my energy, but I've learned where and kind of how to understand where my empathic nature comes from and not get too much overboard. But I think it is a superpower because I'm just naturally curious and I want to learn about others' experiences. So I do think not everyone has that. I always thought everyone was, kind of exactly the same along that line, and not so.
When you did your Make a Difference assessment, what's your primary animal?
Oh God, the turtle.
Yeah. So that's not one of your questions, but that's a big power of the turtle is empathy and really tapping into those one-on-one relationships and that emotional side. So that to me is a superpower because not everybody has it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So you are a creative, and did you color a lot when you were growing up?
I did. I colored all the time.
Good. So my next question will be very, you should be able to just fire off an answer. So remember the big 152 color crayon case? What color are you?
For some reason, magenta comes to mind.
Yeah. Why?
I don't even know. It just popped out. It's kind of red, purple, and I like the name of it. Magenta. Yeah. I mean, right? Good. Magnetic yet powerful. And purple, there's also a color theory around purple, which is part of my personal brand now too, which is it's power, but it's there's a female power aspect to it for women empowerment. So
nice. I feel like you had that one ready to go too.
I did not.
Yeah. I'm sure you're not sneaking ideas.
I have no idea, folks.
My wife didn't send you these questions in advance. All right. Where do you come up with your best ideas?
Right after a workout, usually. So Aaron, I don't know how much we've talked about that, but the book Spark was given to me, and the connection between mind body. So I try to get in a daily workout, for probably 4 to 5 days a week. And when I get my best ideas and energy is usually right after that.
Yeah.
And I know it's coming. So I allow, free time and block my calendar so I can at least have an hour to do those highly creative tasks. And a lot of times that might include writing a blog. So literally workout right into my blog, which, depending on which business I'm writing it for, the creativity just flows. And if I try to do that same thing at night, not so much.
Yeah. I read a book one time called, this is about 5 years ago, called The Net and the Butterfly. And it's about harnessing creative ideas. And And one of the things that they talk about in there was Thomas Edison used to fall asleep with a handful of pennies. And when he would wake up, he would wake up because the pennies fell out of his hand, because his hand, obviously the muscles in his hand would loosen up. And so when the pennies hit the floor, he'd wake up and he would write down the first thing that was in his mind, because it was much like what you're talking about, is that although you're going through, maybe stressing your body in a positive way through working out, you're coming up with creative ideas. He found that resting his body and then waking up immediately spark creative ideas. So I don't know, the way you answered that just made me think of that.
Absolutely. I think it works that way too. Yep.
Yeah. What is the funniest thing that has happened to you recently?
Oh gosh. Oh God. I was just, the one thing I think I told you not to ask me was don't ask me to, tell a joke, because I'm terrible.
You told me not to ask you about favorites. Don't ask me about my favorite, about favorite TV movie. You told me don't ask me about that stuff. So you didn't say anything about this.
Oh my gosh. I wish I could remember, honestly. And there has been something in the last week and I just can't even remember.
All right, maybe we'll come back to it. I'm gonna ask you that one here. Hold on, I'm gonna circle that one and we're gonna come back to it. Put that in the back of your mind. Who would play you in the made-for-TV movie about your life?
I think Sophia Loren comes to mind, and the only reason I'm saying that is because I have been told that I look like her, which is a crazy, insane compliment. Not even that I'm, not even.
I can see it.
Yeah. And that the fact that she's Italian. So maybe if she played my life, she could just infuse her, amazingness and her life into that story. That would be great.
Even there's a little bit of that.
I'm going with that. Actually, I was part of a company and we had to have a doppelganger, and that was chosen for me. So I think that is sticking in my mind somehow.
All right.
So yeah,
I'll take it. I like it. And I do see the resemblance. Just to clarify that for the listeners that aren't watching this on video. What do you do to keep yourself grounded?
I'd like to say meditate, but I have not been consistent with that. So I think for grounding, again, I would come back to the workout, and that is the place where after that process, I feel the most grounded. And I often wrestle with a sense of overwhelmedness, and that is a space right after that workout where I spend some time just in knowing that I am enough and I can do the things. And so I would say I feel the most kind of connected, and I'm usually a little bit of yoga and stretching after that workout so that it's kind of sinks in for the day. Preferably do that at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, good. The mental physical connection there is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yep. What is the lowest grade that you've ever received, and what class?
Oh my God. I love this one. I was just talking to my kids about it the other day. I would say St. Thomas. I think I had a D- in accounting. Oh my gosh. And it was an 8 a.m. Thursday class. And I always made it to class. I mean, I showed up, but the instructor, the whole mix of everything made it very painful. And I'm like, why does this have to be part of the marketing management? I was in journalism. Right. It just was I fought it. And I, realized it weeks before the quarter end and was able to kind of bump it up a little bit. But I honestly, even retaking the test, I'm I still don't get it. I still don't get it. Yeah. And I'm why do I need to?
Yeah. Yeah. Who is your mentor and why?
I think over the course of my life, I've had various mentor relationships. So I would say.
How about most recently?
I feel in a way, so with Ad Women, I feel Renata Faye has been a mentor in many ways. And I almost feel the term mentor, to me, it's always a two-way street, because we're kind of at the same level professionally, but the way in the processes and the way that she does things, I feel I've had just a direct, we worked closely over the last year with the formation of Ad Women. I feel like I have learned so much from her, and that's what a mentor is, right?
That is, yep. And you said it best. It's a two-way street. It's a flywheel. You should be able to lift her up, and she should be able to lift you up, and it should just be able to be mutually supporting. And I love that about a good mentorship relationship.
Yep, for sure.
Well, that was the 9th question. So I'm coming back to number 5. Has anything resonated in your brain, or is it anything? Did you get cut off? And they gave you the thumbs up rather than the finger? Anything? Nothing?
God, this is getting at the favorite thing again too. So I know I have a text in here that made me laugh hilariously for my kids. It was something I don't know. You're gonna have to add that in later.
Yep. Sorry. We're first. Jen, I want to tell you that you're the first person to only complete 8 of the 9 questions.
Oh,
yep. That's still it.
Well, I'm a turtle and I like to process things. So I'm going to bow out on the turtle.
All right. Well, it's an A-, not a full A is okay. 8 out of 10, right? Okay. You're fine. It's whatever. We're not grading here. Jen, I want to say to you that you have been such an early adopter of what we're doing at Coalition 9. I think you're like the 3rd person to sign their membership documents, and you were so in early. I cannot thank you enough for not only being a champion of what we're building as part of this community, but just what you're doing with your business, the thoughtfulness in which you carry yourself, and the types of organizations that you align with. So many reasons I appreciate you. And then on the cherry on the top of this is you said yes when I texted you if you would be on the podcast. Like you fired back a yes, and I think you even hearted it. And I so appreciate you being a part of this.
Yeah, it's actually been really fun, Aaron. You haven't been too intimidating. And I think it was a great conversation. And I love that we do this with all the members. It helps me get to know everyone. So
yeah, that's what it's all about. Good. And plus it's good to get you out in front of people that thank you for being a part of it. And it's good to get you out in front of all these people that don't know who you are. They need to know, everybody needs to know Jen Gilhoi. So how can people find you?
Yeah, so I would go to sparktrackconsulting.com. And that is my website for my Sparktrack marketing business. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. And as I mentioned, now it's just, Jen Gilhoi. So really easy.
All right. I'm going to put all your links to a couple of your social platforms, and then obviously your website in our show notes. And then so people can just go right into whatever their podcast of choice is, and click on them, and they can go right to your site.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Aaron. This has been a joy.
Thank you so much, Jen. On behalf of Jen Gilhoi, this has been the Power of 9 podcast. I am your host, Aaron Eggert, and I want to thank you for the privilege of your time.